Hey, welcome back to the channel. It's Pie Talk Podcast Production, introducing Pie Talk Season 2 with yours truly, your boy Coach B, and introducing No Chill Jill.
So pour out the tea and enjoy some pie. Pursue internal evolution. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends.
Is, as you know, Pie Talk Podcast, pursuing internal evolution with your boy Coach B, and
No Chill Jill.
becoming new yous in all ways and things and yeah, all that. I'm excited. It's been a minute. We haven't been able to connect. Life be lifing, but we stay on the pursuit of our internal evolution, which allows our external outcomes to look a lot different than they used to.
Mm-hmm.
And so this episode, we're more going to be focused on just catching up. A lot of different things going on in both of our lives. Personally, professionally. I'm excited. I'm really excited. But before we start out with all of that, let's tap right into the published authors, Joshua Smith and Jordan Davis.
Yes.
Day 30.
Okay, here we go with day 30. Quiet your mind, visualize positive change, and speak this affirmation with conviction. Here we go. I am constantly seeking out new challenges and opportunities for growth. Yes. Action item. Identify one challenge or opportunity for growth that you've been avoiding. Make a plan to face it head on and use it as an opportunity to learn and grow.
That's a really cool action item. Well,
It's in alignment to one of the things that we were going to talk about.
definitely. So I had a fan, send me kind of a lengthy message on our YouTube channel about doing an episode on like communication and the specifics and the things. And we will be doing that next episode for sure. But I do want to say that with this action item, that is an area that I personally identify as something that I can consistently grow on. Sometimes the closer we are to a person, especially in a relationship, it seems like the barriers to communication are more obvious or more prevalent, right, than if I walk in and communicate with a stranger at a gas station. And so my thing is like, for me, what I'm recognizing is the ability to kind of level that out, right? Communicate and just as trauma informed, as respectful, as curious with somebody I've never met, with somebody I have met. Because for me, it's really about that curiosity fosters connection.
Yep.
So if you're consistently curious, you will always be able to connect, build better relationships, because with curiosity comes questions, and with questions come answers, right? And those answers also allow the person being questioned to be heard and seen and valued, right? Leading with curiosity has done wonders for me in the realm of any form of communication. My daughter's upset, instead of like trying to calm her down or dive into Mr. Fix It, I'm dad, just tell me what happened, right? It's really about what happened and then waiting for that response, hearing it all, not jumping to, well, you should have said this to your friend, or you should have did this, or you shouldn't cry over that, but just really acknowledging and honoring what's happening.
Right, and letting each person process what is going on. Sometimes when we're communicating, we're filled with emotions that we may not be able to articulate what it is that we're feeling. So when somebody is asking us a question of curiosity, it allows us to take a step back for a moment and recognize what is going on and why am I feeling like this?
Yeah, very much so. That's been my biggest, I wouldn't say struggle, but that's been just kind of on my mind a lot, is like, how am I showing up in my half of any engagement or conversation? Like, what does that look like? What does someone feel when they are done communicating with me, you know? And so I think it's really important as we, do the work on ourselves, being able to identify emotions in real time takes practice, takes intention, it takes self care, right?
Yes.
Which leads me to another one of the topics I kind of wanted to bring up is just we ascribe negativity to words that are not deserving of being considered negative. And one of the examples was like the word consequence.
Yeah.
Right? When we hear consequence, we think all the bad, everything that can go wrong is a consequence. But also, when I was doing really well in my last job, the consequence of that was I got promoted to a different job higher up in the same company. So remembering that the words we use and the things that we agree to can really shape our worldview and have us looking at the world in a way that if we just challenged it a little bit, it might change the way we start to communicate, because then we have a different understanding of the language that is supposed to be shared. Like, we could both be speaking English, say the same word, but if we don't get curious and like clarify like what it means to each person,
right,
you're both walking away with a complete different understanding of how that conversation went.
Totally.
Because you're using the words based on your belief system and core belief system. And so I find that very interesting, right? Same with bias. Like, people say bias and you think, oh, I'm biased against that. Bias is not synonymous with prejudice, even though they're used interchangeably. To be prejudiced is to be like against something for a specific reason, right? But when you're biased, it just means moving towards or away from a thing. So it's not positive or negative.
Right, it's neutral.
It's neutral until you ascribe whatever it is you're biased. So if you're watching your nieces or nephews play football, then you're biased for that team to win.
Yeah.
Right? Even if you don't normally watch middle school football.
Right.
But in that instance, you have a bias because that's your nephew on that team.
Makes
right?
sense.
So you want them to win. That's a bias towards a victory. It's not always negative. And so just think about things when you're thinking about your own biases. What makes you move towards a thing or a person, and what makes you move away from a thing or a person or a task. And so I see your mind just
yeah, it is, because it all resonates. It's super important, and communication is one of the most important things in life, I feel like, to move us through life. And it honestly, to be personal, like, that was the lesson that I had to learn in my marriage, is I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't grow up talking about my feelings. I come from a very loving family, but we never really like talked about deep feelings and what was going on. So I didn't know how to articulate well. And it took me, 12 years in a marriage and getting divorced to understand, hey, this is a really important thing to know how to do as an adult. And I'm committed to actively learning how to communicate. And so now, as this, person who I am today, communication is the utmost important thing for me. And now, sometimes I over communicate. So I need to, have that balance. But absolutely, it's all about, not only communication, but comprehension of what is being communicated. So understanding, like, what is active listening and repeating back what you're hearing from the other person. So then y'all are on the same page of understanding of what is and what is not.
Well, apparently we're doing an episode on communication. So
well, hold on. We still have to do our cards and everything. We gotta.
it'll happen.
Okay.
It'll
All right.
happen.
All right.
I just really want to highlight, like, we weren't ready for the communication conversation, but apparently we are, right?
Right.
And so what I would ask you,
Mm-hmm.
when, you know, part of what we do is we talk about the message, right? And we try to avoid the mess so much.
Right.
But at the same time, when I hear you and you're saying, I used to communicate, it took me 12 years. Now somebody watching might be like, but what did you do to get from there to where you are today? Like, what are some of the steps? What are some of the barriers that you had to overcome with your previous communication style versus, would you classify yourself as assertive now, or still working on it?
Oh, I definitely am in this era right now of creating boundaries and being unapologetic and cutting out things, people, items, whatever, that are no longer serving me. And, allowing myself to trust the process of what is showing up for me in my life. When a conversation needs to happen, then I am definitely comfortable and confident to express what is so. It's taken a lot of work, to get here.
Yeah. Even the elevator, the lengthy elevator ride version, right? Not the 2-minute elevator speech, but just how do you go from being passive to being assertive, to standing up for, like you said, setting boundaries is something that I do a lot of trainings. I do, emotional regulations. That is one of the hardest things in my experience that I've witnessed as a, like, behavioral health provider and person that works with individuals one-on-one. Setting and maintaining boundaries is one of the hardest things that I've supported people working through, and in my own personal life. Because to set a boundary is cool. You can send the text, you can do the thing, but then when they break it, how are you enforcing, like, hey, this is my boundary?
Yeah, just saying so. Like, it really, because it all goes back to, the personal development and being committed and being committed to yourself and figuring out what commitments are you going to honor, right? And one of the very strong commitments that I made to myself a long time ago and that I hold near and dear is to always show up authentically, to challenge myself to be uncomfortable, and to always, or to never sacrifice myself and my happiness for anyone or anything. And so, because I have those strong commitments, it's easy for me now to just check somebody if I need to.
Yeah. And
in a nice way,
in a nice way.
In a nice way.
In my field, we call it, in a peer way, right? But also, so what that makes me think about is, when we're talking about that clarification, the words and our understanding of them, I also know that authenticity trends, right? So for our viewers and for my own curiosity, what does showing up authentically mean to you, Jill?
Yeah, great question, because that means something different for everybody, right? So showing up authentically means for me to be true to my values, to my morals, and to lead with love and light. Confirmation of that.
Right? That's like the perfect thing. So what authentically showing up to me means that I can be who I am whenever I am, right? And what I mean by that is, you might feel like you're not the same person you were 2 weeks ago or 6 months ago. So whoever I show up as when I'm being me, my genuine self. So for me, showing up authentically means like if I don't like a particular thing, I can say that without being guilt tripped or offending someone. Because for me, showing up authentically means I'm just providing you data about me. Right? And if I can do that in a safe space wherever I go, then that's when I feel like I was able to show up authentically.
Right.
Because I might show up authentically and then get resistance because somebody's offended, or why do you think that, or why would you say that, right? Well, that's because that's what I think or I believe or I feel.
Right.
And so because of that, it's like, why would I diminish myself to appease another person, especially if A, I don't know that person very well, or B, I know that person very well. So if we have that relationship, then we shouldn't be in a space where we have to like walk on eggshells or tiptoe or not say like a particular thing at the risk of like a tumultuous situation or argument or something like that, because I'm not with it.
Okay, so let me ask a question. Bringing it back to what you said earlier when we first started, that one of the things that, and correct me if I'm saying it wrong, but one of the things that you had said was communicating with somebody that you just met versus somebody that you have a relationship with, whatever that looks like, can sometimes in a nutshell be easier than communicating with somebody that you're in have a relationship with.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that going based off of that is like, we should feel comfortable 100% to communicate about anything and everything with the people who are closest to us. But why is it that we sometimes feel like we can't communicate with that said person?
My first thought to answer that is, I think sometimes there's either trauma, and with that particular relationship, where let's say you're in a relationship and you've been accused of something or you did something, and then there's now lives that kind of insecurity or that accusatorily type of tone, where a normal conversation without that trauma in the past or without that transgression that you're moving through. So if you remove that from the factor and you ask a person that same thing, so hey, where were you at? Where'd you just come from, babe, or whatever? But if you're somebody that's been in a relationship that's been that where are you or where were you or what are you doing right now is weaponized because it's rooted in insecurity, then the communication can become defensive. It could be difficult to communicate because then it's hard to gauge. Like, are you asking me because it's like conversational, or are you insecure about where I am and what I'm doing? So you're asking because of that,
right?
Which is a different energy.
Totally.
One's an attack and one's an invitation. Hey, tell me about your day. And one's like, tell me where you are right now because I'm in my head about something and I want to know that you're not doing something nefarious.
Yeah. So how do we, when we're in a long-term relationship, how do we communicate healthy and respectful when there are situations that have trauma or that things come up and it's uncomfortable? How do we address our significant other in those situations?
One way that I would suggest, and like I work with people with emotional regulation, but also with like building relationships, because parenting is also relationships, right?
Totally.
So, being a parenting instructor with one-on-one and group sessions, I've seen a lot. I start to see patterns, and then I apply that to myself. So something that I think that people really would be happy to know is, like, as an instructor, as somebody who does this like for a living, it's mutual. So every session I have with someone, I'm also learning and seeing ways where I can take home strategies that I may have shared with them, but then I'm like, oh, that actually might work at home,
right,
for myself. And so my thing is, it's like about partnering together, like deciding as a couple, like, hey, let's do the love language quiz together, for example, right? Like, just starting that curiosity all over again. Let's get curious. Okay, we've been together 10 years. When we got together 10 years, we grew, we lived, we loved, we laughed, whatever. We're still together. But how often are we, as not only individuals, doing the personal internal evolution, but as couples in a union, how often are we like really looking at where we are, who we are, and like starting that process all over? I think that would be like one of the biggest first steps, is to be like, okay, you got together, you've been together 10 years, you've been going through the motions, you've been doing the things, but you're not who you were 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't matter if you've been with this. Well,
yeah.
I
know, I'm just messing with
it's
you.
really hard to say that somebody's going to be the exact same consciousness,
right,
intelligence, into spiritual evolution, whatever it is. A decade is a long time,
for sure.
And so what that ends up being is, when is it okay, or when can you initiate, like, hey, let's get to know each other again.
Yeah, let's date. Like,
yeah, let's get to know each other right now. Let's do these quizzes, love languages, personality tests, any of the different things that you're both willing to be interested in, to bring you connection, to really delve into, because humans, we're curious by nature. So if we just stop at any point in our relationship and just decide, you know what, I wonder if I could go on a game show and win with you, if they're asking me like your favorite thing, you're this, you're that, you're this, what, A or B, what would your partner choose? Like, how good would you be in one of those game shows?
Yeah.
First, at the beginning of your relationship versus 5 or 6 years in, where you feel like you've just been in this monotonous routine. You're passing by. Sometimes you feel like roommates with kids, whatever the case may be. And even if there's no kids involved, just, that routine can become mundane, and people can grow, because you're going to grow individually. Even if you live in the same house and sleep in the same bed, you're still going to always be on your individual personal journeys.
That's right.
So the ability to communicate when you're hitting certain benchmarks, or you reach certain milestones, or things become, you change your career in your mind sometimes way before you ever do it, in actuality. So when that thought happens, maybe sharing that thought with your partner or whatever, like really think like, man, I just realized I don't feel like a carpenter anymore, right? I want to do this. I think it's when we keep things in, is when we start to build like those communication, or that resistance, and sometimes, hopefully not, resentment.
Yeah.
But that resentment is really internal, because the person that we really are upset with is ourselves. Because if I start resenting you, we're in a relationship, let's say, and I start resenting you for something I didn't share with you, and now you don't know about it.
Right.
So now I'm resenting you because for whatever reason I put this block up, like, I don't want to tell her. But then I'm upset because I'm sitting on this thing and she has no understanding about it because I didn't share it.
Right.
But what comes out is going to be irritability, anger, or whatever towards you, when it's not even your fault.
Yep, I see that circle.
And so the cycle becomes like, I didn't tell the thing, but now she doesn't know the thing. And now I'm upset and having resentment because she doesn't know the thing that I didn't tell her.
Right. So with that being said,
solution.
What's the solution?
I'm asking you.
Oh.
That was a solution, question mark.
Got it. Land it. Okay, so I would say that the solution is to, one, have an understanding of like both people's communication styles. How do you communicate as an individual, and how does the other person receive, right? These are things that we should talk about at the beginning of a relationship. You know, it doesn't, yeah. So anyway, so I think that it's about asking the clarifying questions of what is your communication style, right in alignment with, what is your love language. And, for long term or at the beginning of a relationship, I think that the solution, well, let's not talk about a beginning because we're talking about a seasoned relationship.
Yeah.
Okay.
At this junction in the conversation, right, we're already in it.
We're in deep.
We're in deep. We're talking about reparations, maybe.
Okay.
Because we've been in it and maybe we've lost what we thought was great communication, or something's missing and we want to get it back.
Right. So I think going back to the basics, getting back to the basics. And when there is rockiness in a relationship, I think it is super important to, one, spend time alone so you can get grounded, get your thoughts together, and be able to articulate exactly how you're feeling, what's going on, and create a space, a safe space, when both individuals are not upset or emotional or anything like that. Just create a date. And this is our, check-in. And just have a very candid, open conversation, and just have the understanding that what is fighting fair, okay? Fighting fair is allowing the other person to finish before you say anything. It is not raising your voice at each other. It's about clearly and lovingly communicate. And also, a lot of times in long-term relationships, we drift apart, like B was saying. And it's really important that we get committed to each other again, because yes, we're both individuals that are choosing to come together and do life.
Yes.
So we have to have that longevity to always understand that us as individuals and us as a unit, as a couple, always are going to be evolving. So just to recap, I think it's super important to get back to basics of the foundations of a relationship.
True. And you know me, I'm a guru of self, right? Not in a what they call selfish way, because again, that's one of those words. When you hear the trending term self-care is so important, self-care is actually being selfish so that you can show up for others and in a good space. Because if you aren't selfish, if you aren't intentional with caring for yourself and making sure your own cup is overflowing, because it's the extra, it's the overflow that we pour into others. But I digress, right? And what's my biggest thing is all of what Jill said, plus starting with yourself. So rather than pursuing how someone else is loved or their love language, how someone else needs to communicate, or someone else's learning style, even the way that you're sharing information you want them to learn, do it for yourself. So do your own love language quiz first, do your own whatever personalities test first, understand your own learning styles and communication styles first, because then you can come to a space and say, well, these are mine. So now you're modeling what it looks like to share data about yourself, right? So then, like Jill was saying, when you get back to starting from the basics, it could start as simple as, still like broccoli? Yeah, no, okay. Tomatoes? Yeah, no, right? Because there was a time in my life where, from a kid all the way up until literally one day, early 20s, I grabbed a burger with tomatoes on it. And then all of a sudden, I was like, I love tomatoes. Up to that point, I'd always be like, no tomatoes, mom, and no, and it was a narrative I told myself, but it wasn't based in reality.
Right.
It wasn't actually based in data that I collected. It was based in a narrative that I programmed at whatever age, that I just didn't like these things and would never eat them. But as soon as I did as an adult, I had to create a new narrative, right? So I think constantly revisiting our core beliefs, our narratives, distrusting ourselves. Like, we're quick to be like, that person's lying, or that don't feel right. But how often do we actually check our own thoughts as being sus, right? Like, oh, why do I think that? Why do I want to engage in this tea? And why am I about to shit talk this person? Like, that's not cool. Like, how often are we actually holding ourselves to the same standard that we hold others to when it comes to communicating and authenticity?
Good point.
Right? So I think that it starts with pie, pursuing internal evolution. It starts with, if you understand yourself, you're in a way more likely trauma informed and able to receive when someone else is giving you data about how they are, because you can relate, because you've already done the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to, like, active listening, asking questions, being curious, and also, repeating what the person said to you so you understand exactly what you guys are talking about. Yeah, and the way that we show up for ourselves and talk internally to ourselves is just as important of how we communicate with other people. So it's like our mind and our soul intuition is always going to be a tug of war, subconscious and unconscious, right? And so it's really important to learn how to differentiate between those two worlds. And sometimes we can get, really tricked by our mind. Our mind will tell us crazy things.
Yeah, because, I love that. But also, because our programs are programs that sometimes we put in, and then they become default responses. Some people call them trauma responses, but if you don't necessarily correlate trauma to a certain belief, then it's just a default response based on a narrative that you programmed in your mind. And that narrative may have been something that was handed down to you from your parents, or from just your experience as a youth with your friends. They developed this code and they told you, this is what men do, this is what females do, this is what we do or don't do in our culture. Like, when you're talking about, you come from a culture of not really getting too beyond the surface level of emotions and identifying what they are, and like, I'll just be super lovey-dovey and we'll just scratch all the rest of the stuff, right? But it's like, I get upset, I get anxious, I get scared. If we don't have the tools to communicate those and identify them in ourselves, then how are we going to have the understanding when someone else is showing up with that energy?
Right.
We're going to have that amygdala response. I'm being threatened, this is scary, and then that's where arguments and reactivity and tumultuous situations become, present in your life. And it really boils down to understanding yourself.
Yeah. And it's just like, look at, how many updates we have to do on our smartphones, right? There's a new update like every month, it seems like.
Yeah, it feels like every 9 days.
For real. So it's like, we are the operating system, and we need to reprogram and update our operating system every so often.
The more often, the better, right? Because what I believe today, I might read something that takes me down a rabbit hole of research. And by the end of that process, I've completely changed my mind about something that I would have considered a fact or something that I believed in, or at least information that unchallenged information gets filed default as a truth. So you'll argue something that you've never actually even researched the validity behind. And so start with yourself. If you're going to research something, if you're going to learn about something in its entirety, if you're going to become a master of something, why not start with self?
Yes, I think you have to.
Become a master. Yeah, but even
not
saying that,
everybody.
a
Yeah,
lot of people are not
very true.
in a position where they have self mastery. They still follow, the different ways that we're incarcerated. It's not just, those of you that know I went to prison, right? But I was not always only incarcerated because I was in prison or in a jail. I was incarcerated by my own narratives about my culture, about the gang impact, the beliefs that I chose to write my program with were flawed, but I never challenged them until I did. And then when I did, they didn't quite match up with what I call a 5-point checklist belief system. And it's something that I just kind of thought about, where if someone gives you brand new information and you had 5 boxes that you had to check off, they all had to be green, none could be red.
Okay.
In order for it to go from new information to a belief in your brain or a belief that you can stand on, what would those 5 check boxes be for you?
Okay, so it's for an
I don't have
individual.
the formula,
Okay,
right?
got
So
it.
in my book, I put
Hey.
an example of it in there, right? The book is out, Coach B's
Yes.
4 Cycles of Freedom, and it's really just diving into the philosophy and the skills that I personally developed while incarcerated to set myself free, right? And so there's an example of 5 checklists in this book, but you would have to come up with your own. Like, what is it? And have you even thought about that, right? When
That's
you're talking about
yeah.
communication. If I said, hey, I heard da 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 da, and you're like, right. Now, when you go into your next engagement and someone says something similar that reminds you of what I just said, are you going to say, Coach B said, or are you going to say, well, yeah, da 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 da? You're going to repeat it, because at that point you have somewhere between leaving me and entering that engagement decided to believe what I said. And then when you repeat it, you've stamped it for yourself as this is true.
Yeah.
And then if someone argues that, you might even find yourself in an argument. But never really challenged my original information. You didn't research it, you just accepted it on its face, right? And so that's what I talk about when we talk about, like, what are the things that we believe in and what does our belief system machine look like? Is it flawed? Is it like, if my mom says it, it must be true? Then we're talking like Bobby Boucher, right? He believed everything his mama said.
Right.
But what happens when your system has never been looked at?
Right.
You've never thought about what it is that makes something go from random piece of information intake to a belief that you will now perpetuate when you talk to someone else.
Yeah, that's a really good example, or that's a really good point, right? In the mastery of self, because a lot of times people, it's, easier to go with the flow, right? But is it really though? I don't know. That's up to each individual person.
In my experience, challenging the narratives and deciding for yourself that you are the authority on what you believe, how you move, how you show up, how you think, how you feel, how you love, when you really believe that and you start taking those steps, it's liberating. It's liberating to be like, well, you know what? Everybody in the room is saying that that thing is green, but I'm pretty sure it's red.
Right.
So then you got to be curious. Like, is this a trick?
Mm-hmm.
Do they really think it's green, or am I colorblind?
Right.
Question
everything.
Your reality.
Yeah.
Question why you're believing in the things you believe, or question why you're so quick to not even question when somebody shares something with you, right? So when we're communicating, think about what's the end goal? Like, are we communicating to get a need met? And if we are, what's that need? So why am I saying the thing I'm about to say to my friend or my coworker when I go to the gas station? I know that communication is based on I'm buying the things. Here they are. We're exchanging money, whatever currency. And because I'm more inclined to just engage with people, I might make a comment about their sunglasses or a cool hat I see them wearing or something to have a little bit more human connection and not just be sterile, like, oh, give me this, give me that, head down in the phone, whatever. Trying to engage on a human level as much as I possibly can. And that becomes like, so if I styled my communication style in the public is curious. I have a curious communication style because when a thing happens and someone engages in conversation with me, I want to learn more.
Yep.
And so I ask questions. And then there's different styles that are like traditional, passive aggressive, right? So I think just understanding your own communication style, your learning style, what makes you believe that you're seen, heard, and valued? What are the things that have to happen in order for you to feel that when you're in an engagement? And then how can you provide that for the recipient of an engagement with yourself? Like, how do you show up in a way that maybe this person can feel seen and heard and valued? And that's when we kind of transition from the golden rule to the platinum rule, where we go from treating others the way we want to be treated to treating others the way they want to be treated.
Right.
Curiosity will get you there.
Definitely. And asking open-ended questions, not yes and no type of questions, really, being curious and not being afraid to ask those questions, because it will allow people to open up to what is so for them.
Exactly. And with that, in addition, not being afraid to answer questions from your authentic self. Right?
Yep.
When someone asks you something and you know that if you say yes, it would make them feel better, even though you don't want to say yes, or you aren't really in alignment with those politics or whatever it is that's being talked about that you're disagreeing with to move the relationship and the conversation forward. But it's better to be, uncomfortable and secure in your relationship, because like, you know what, this person always says what's on their mind. They always keep it real. I know it's going to be fresh and authentic, and I know I'm not going to be given, I'm not going to be, what's that word, like flattered for no reason, or where people are just saying things to just, I'm not dealing with like a yes person.
Right.
I know if I ask this person, they're going to give me genuine feedback, at least from their perspective, because that's all any one of us can do. We're all experts on our own experience on earth. So everything you share with somebody that's from your belief system, that's how you feel authentically, it's a gift. It's data about you.
Right.
So before you share that data, you should probably know what it is.
That sounds about right. Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah. So before we read these cards and really pop out of here, I really just wanted to have you highlight some of the new things that's going on with your brand, and you've pivoted into something similar but still different.
Yep. Yeah, it's all about, like I said, creating space for me to do the things that feel good to me, to be authentic, right? To create boundaries and get rid of things that aren't serving me anymore. And, I've been doing meal prep for the New You brand for the past 6 years. And although, it has been a great run, I just was getting burnt out. And the burnout was real. And, I am super passionate about community and education, empowerment, and inspiration, specifically for our youth, and working, in community in every capacity that I possibly can. And that is the shift that I have been working on the past year and a half. And I finally just had this epiphany. Sometimes, I feel like I have a lot of pressure on me. And I was sitting at my house and I was like, you know what? Who says that I have to do this anymore? Who actually, who says that? Who decides?
That's so rich. It's in the book.
Of course it is.
It's that very concept, that very that moment, almost those words.
Wow.
By whose authority?
Mm-hmm.
Who said I have to do this way? That, like, it's in my book.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, when you're in alignment, when your assignment is your assignment, and the signs keep popping up.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Totally.
Hearing things like that,
yeah,
solidifies.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's super dope. that is, in your book. And that's like one of the big things that I've been experiencing this year in 2025 is really setting boundaries and showing up for myself and doing the things that makes me feel good, that fulfills me and brings me joy. And so, yes, on Friday, I had this epiphany and I said, I get to decide. I get to decide how I'm going to live my life. And if I so choose that I don't want to do meal prep anymore, that's what I'm going to choose. And so it was just like, boom, I just got, download information from, I am a very spiritual person, and I tap into my intuition and to the creator and, all my spiritual committee, and everything was just like clear as day.
Unanimous.
Yes. That boom, this
all
is
votes
happening.
Are in.
All votes are in.
All votes are green.
Yes. All boxes are checked. Right.
All boxes are checked.
Yeah. So I'm super duper excited because my program director, Jessica, and I have been working really hard this past year and a half, getting into the re-entry scene, getting more work with our local nonprofits, and this is really starting to happen. I went to a networking meeting on Monday and I met a super key player in community, and B knows who this person is. And it was just kind of like full circle. And we have a meeting, scheduled for next week, and to get into the reentry space. And it's just really exciting.
The same person, mind you, me and Jill have been very close friends for going on 8 years.
Yeah.
And we both met this same person separately.
Yes.
And she has a meeting with this person next week. And I also am doing a presentation because I invited this person to a panel that I'm presenting for my work about reentry and about the importance of peer work and reentry and the work that we do. And so, yeah, it was just super funny. She comes before we sit down and do this podcast. It's like, hey, do you know so-and-so? I'm like, yeah, actually, we've been linking up like really recently, and really, we actually talked for like 30, 40 minutes yesterday on the phone. And because I'd invited her to the panel and she accepted. So we get to have this really strong panel of individuals that do the things. Like, none of us are data driven when it comes to like how many people walked in the door and checked the box. We are actually doing one-on-one sessions. Like outside of my regular job, I still meet with people one-on-one. I help build resumes. I help, with parenting, with advocacy, with if they want to start up a business, like we have those conversations. And so for me, it's really about people like that and aligning myself with people that are more concerned with actual positive outcomes than accolades for program results data.
Right.
Right.
Totally.
And so, yeah, you have met one of the brilliant, strong-minded individuals in the field. The only reason we're not saying her name because we haven't discussed that. Right. I don't just, name drop and throw people out in my podcast. Like
totally.
But I'm pretty sure if I invited her to sit down, we'd have a conversation on the podcast.
Totally. So yeah.
When that happens, we'll refer back to this and be like, this is who we were talking about.
Right. For sure. Right? Yeah. So, again, going back to like showing up for yourself and being in alignment, being in flow, being able to, have your cup full, overflowing. And when it starts to feel like you're drowning, you got to do something about it. You got to do, it's your responsibility. It's as an individual, we have to do what makes us fulfilled and have joy in our heart.
Yeah.
And with that being said, I'm really excited that I got a copy of B's new book with a beautiful, signature and note to No Chill Jill. And I'm going to cherish this forever and ever. So tell us more about, what was the baseline? How did this actually come into fruition?
I mean, man, it goes back to when we were communicating and I was locked up and I wrote a curriculum and the response, it was received really well within the unit, with the reentry staff, and then just fast forward, getting out, doing the work. I really wanted to create a powerful tool, right? Because I've been asked so many different times, like, share your story here. Will you come here and tell your story? Like, your story of resilience and recovery is so inspiring. And I love doing that. Don't get me wrong. I'll show up almost every time, right? But at the same time, I wanted to be able to reach in. Because, yes, I work for a company that does certified peer counselor trainings inside of DLC, right? And I'm the program manager of that program. So I get to do that. But when that training's over, I'm gone. So I wanted to really continue the inspiration. So not only did I create or did I write Coach B's 4 Cycles of Freedom, which is a lot of my philosophy, but it's also like real life lived experience. There's pictures in there of me, incarcerated with individuals that some of them are going to get this book sent to them, and it's going to be a surprise because a lot of people get out and they don't write the people they say they're going to write, and they, and some of us that do that have that kind of like almost akin to survivor's guilt, like right, like I get to get out and you don't. It's like you almost, those last few days in the unit, you start like distancing from God. These are guys you ate with every day, broke bread with, talked to. Sometimes you're in the visiting room with their families and your families. Like all these different connections are made. And then you get to go home. You're like ecstatic, excited that you get to go home. But there's that piece of you that's like, damn, but he doesn't. So when you say what was the baseline, like that's it. That's, I wanted, and so when I thought about it, it was like, I want a 5x8, under 100 pages, small but impactful. Because I remember being in there. These are the size and types of books that the most intelligent, engaging, and on a journey of recovery type of, incarcerated individuals that I was in there with. These are the types of books that I seen that they carried around or that they handed to somebody else, because the attention span of America right now is very, very Yeah. Songs they used to be 4 or 5 minutes long. Even songs are like, you get 80 seconds and that's like
For
a new
real. It's
hot
like,
single,
what?
right? So I just really wanted to kind of be in alignment with that. I wanted to meet people where they're at, put my
Love it.
story in a book, but also it's more about the message and the tools. There's not a lot of gang banging or violence or like war stories in here.
Yeah.
No, this is a tool, and it's a philosophy based on how I got to be where I am, how I went from incarcerated and released 10 plus times to free for the first time. That's what's in this book.
That's awesome.
You know, and so that journey is ongoing.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm doing the work. And so I hope to entice, you know, many organizations to buy these books by the boatloads and then donate them in the prisons, right? So I would rather that people in there didn't have to pay for them.
Of course.
You know, so you know, and then there's the One Vehicle, One Life, which is a workbook, which is an 8x11, a little bit bigger, thicker, and that's more of a personal journey of self-development. There's anger management, leadership exercises, you know. So I have both of those. One is just a really powerful, impactful tool that is small and light, you carry around, have your highlighter, so you know somebody could really practice these concepts. And then the workbook is like really like a curriculum based self-empowerment, you know, individualized, do it at your own pace, do it what you will. And so I needed to have both.
Totally. They go hand in hand.
Yeah, I needed to have both. And so I'm really excited because the first time I did it, you know, I got so excited. I kind of rushed and I dropped a version and it was on Amazon and I ordered it, got it back, and I was like, what the, like, you know, the person I used to edit it and format, they had pictures in there that I sent them to, you know, put in the manuscript. And even me not paying attention, I just wanted to hurry up and get it out there. Those pictures were just randomly placed throughout the book. And then as I read it front to back, I was just like, I can't. Yeah. I can't do it.
They were out of place and
it didn't make sense. So I replaced the formatting, and that's why it went from blue to red.
Okay.
Because in the situation I wanted to show there was a difference. And then because I was in the manuscript and I'm who I am, I added some things. Right. I blessed it with some additional concepts and just not too much more, but just a little bit more.
Still 100 pages.
Yeah. So. My goal is always, you know, under 100 pages, short, powerful, impactful. Like hopefully, you know, people read this and are inside and even outside and able to resonate with the concepts and the tools that allow them to step into the next version of themselves that's awaiting for them, write their own chapter, become free in ways they didn't even know they weren't free until maybe they start doing some of that
updating their own programming,
updating
their operating system.
Exactly. Well, we are nearing the hour, which is you know, it's been a month, so we went over our normal like 45 minutes. I think we have a lot going on.
We do have a lot going on. All great things for sure.
Yeah. Some of you don't realize like we're catching up.
We are
live.
Yeah.
Learning about like talking about these things sometimes for the first time in person, right? We haven't discussed my book or even been in the space. I was able to give her a book today. So that's just it's really
awesome,
good.
And I'm excited to read it.
Yeah. And I'm excited to partner and still build community. I really believe two things. We are what we agree to, and there's no community without collaboration.
Facts. Yep.
Yeah. I think we'll forego even the 4 agreement cards. Like,
all right.
Any last final comments?
You know, just continue to put yourself first. It's not selfish, it's selfless. And lead with love and light and agree to what you are going to do and follow through in those commitments.
Absolutely. I love that Jill uses some of my favorite words, agreements and commitments, right?
Pour out the tea and enjoy some pot. Pursue internal evolution. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends.